Loudoun Valley Ideas Fest. Woo! Thank you all for coming, and I really want to thank you guys for giving it a shot the first go round. And I need to thank my partner in crime, Heather Olis. I would be remiss if I didn't say that it is an honor to be an English teacher at Loudoun Valley High School. I have the greatest job on the planet. Each day I get to hang out with folks like you and like these and sift through intense ideas and really work to raise student voice. So it is an honor. It's been extraordinary to put this evening together for you and work with these folks. So just a few details. First of all, the way we're going to run tonight, it should take about an hour. And between each talk, which is about 6 to 8 minutes, we'll have a moment for you to digest or nod to your neighbor before we announce the next speaker. We have no flash photography because we are videoing the event, and we've got photographs. So be careful with flash photography. If you do need to leave early, let's make sure that we wait between talks. Let's see, what else? 2 exit doors. If we're so interested in authentic reactions, some of our talks are lighthearted. If they're funny, go ahead and laugh. Some of the talks are more serious in nature, and I know this community is always filled with respect. So without further ado, I want to announce our first speaker, Felix Knight. And Felix's talk is Video Games, an Evolving Connection Between Art and People.
Okay. The idea of art, what it is and what it can be, has been challenged as long as art has existed itself. And this has always scared and confounded people and frustrated a lot of artists themselves. One of my favorite lessons from AP Music Theory this year has been learning about Igor Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring. This ballet, when it premiered in 1913, incited a riot. Music was surreal and visceral and dissonant. It was very, very dark and tense. The dancers were not elegant. They were pounding and stomping around in awkward, uncomfortable poses. It didn't fit within what people thought a ballet could be, so they rioted. And 100 years later, people like me love it for all the same reasons that people back then hated it. And people back then hated it for all the same reasons that people love it today. Now, it would seem as though sometimes people can take time to adjust to new art. It's not that the ideas and emotions that they convey are foreign, but rather the avenue of communication is new and different. And this is especially the case with video games. As a video game developer who has been making games for 7 or 8 years now, this is something of a curse, but moreover, in my mind, a blessing than anything else. I get such a unique opportunity to be part of a generation of pioneers, game developers that are going to inspire other people to look at video games the same way they do as other art forms. What I mean by taking games seriously is that people don't tend to look for games that they connect with in the same way they do other art forms. We can all talk about how a particular song or movie or book has changed our perspective on life, but fewer of us would reference a video game in the same way. Part of this is because video game design is a very complex topic, and people don't tend to think like designers unless they're taught to. We're all taught how to analyze literature in our English classes. We all know what metaphors to look for, sentence structure, diction, all of these nuances that a writer can use to make their work more complex, more worth taking the time to explore and reflect on. Video game developers use audible and visual art in order to create context for the player and their actions. But what distinguishes video games as an art form in and of themselves is that they are interactive. Every single frame of animation, the layout of every room, and every area, the way things move and sound, the way the player interacts with them, even simple things like menu design, these all have such incredible depth. And when they're used effectively by game developers, they can be powerfully expressive. To give you an idea of the effect of good game design, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about a really special game called Hyper Light Drifter. Now, of course, this talk doesn't completely suffice as a substitute for playing the game itself, but hopefully I'll be able to give you a little bit of context for why it's such a fantastic game. Hyper Light Drifter is very easy to pick up and works on very simple mechanics. But as the player progresses, it offers anybody a considerable challenge. It gives powerful insight into the ideas and emotions of its creator, Alex Peterson. The story that it tells is one told without any words, just beautiful visuals, music, and powerful gameplay. That story acts as an allegory to the game developer's real life struggle with a life-threatening heart condition. This is the kind of game that I want people to play. It's fun. It offers insight into somebody else's thoughts and emotions. And the message that its game developer, Alex Peterson, is telling us is one that can only be expressed through this particular game. Now, I'm not just saying go buy Hyper Light Drifter, but I think that if people looked for games like that one, that they could take time to connect with and think about and consider and learn from, that would put people more in touch with experiences they never even imagined could exist. Now, whenever we think about why interacting with and learning from art is so important, I would like to go back to the Rite of Spring and thinking about that. It failed miserably, and that the crowd had a very negative reaction to it. And that upset the composer, Igor Stravinsky, immensely, as it would anybody in this room. But the riot is all the more evidence that it succeeded in that tense, fever-dreamy feel that it was going for. It created genuine fear, concern, and discomfort within those people that manifested itself physically. When I finished Hyper Light Drifter, my heart was still pounding from the final battle, but at the same time, I felt weightless and immersed and humbled by the magnitude of what I had just experienced. The story that Hyper Light Drifter tells is an important one. And even if other people have different interpretations of what its game developer is trying to tell them, I think that Alex Peterson tells a story about life and death and sickness. Regardless of other people's interpretations of it, their critiques of it, it's important to me. The sort of emotions that art evokes push people to act. I wanted to come talk about this game tonight, and it's influenced how I work. The stories and themes tell us about who we are, how we view this world, and how we go about living it. Video games are often considered a method of escapism, an easy pastime that's a mindless little thing that we can do. But I think that that cannot be more false for all forms of art. When we play thoughtfully, art puts us in touch with our own realities and helps us understand one another. Hyper Light Drifter isn't my reality, but it helps offer insight into somebody else's. I don't live with the same heart condition that Alex Peterson does. I didn't learn anything about it from the game, but I did learn about how he views life, death, sickness. That's important to me. And for all those reasons, I think that we should remember not to judge art based on the medium through which the artist is speaking. Let's not make excuses for why we don't play video games. Instead, let's make an honest effort to go and search for new experiences and learn from them. Let's take time to experience all forms of art equally. Thank you very much.
So thank you. Now we have Charlie Trokel and his talk, Fear and Disappointment, What We Get Wrong About Self-Harm.
When I was in the 7th grade, I met a girl named Elle. Elle was a photographer, loved the band Snow Patrol, and had a difficult relationship with her parents. One night, Elle sent me a text. It said, "I'm going to come to school tomorrow wearing bandages. I'm going to tell everybody that I fell out of a tree while taking pictures and scratched myself on the way down. Please don't ask me about it." Now, of course, this was an impossible request. And so with a little prodding, she admitted, "I'm cutting myself again. I didn't think you would buy the tree story." Now, I was 14 at the time, and I had only ever joked about people who cut themselves. It was my idea that those people didn't really exist in real life, or at least that they would never become a part of mine. Faced with this new and terrifying reality, I shut down. I deleted Elle's contact, stopped hanging out with her, and basically never saw her again. To this day, it's one of my most monumental regrets. That wasn't the last time I encountered self-harm, and based on the statistical frequency of the practice, I should have encountered it a lot more. 1 in 5 adolescents will self-harm, which means in this room of roughly 80 people, 16 have or will. Now, we're going to have a hard time guessing, because our 16 are no more likely to be girls than they are to be boys. The practice distributes evenly between both genders. And of everyone who self-harms, only 50% have any diagnosable psychiatric disorder. Of that 50%, no one disorder is represented any more than any other. And before you go rolling up the sleeves of the person sitting next to you, let's consider that our 16 friends could be holding matches to their skin, punching walls until their knuckles bleed, or biting, scratching, or hitting themselves. We're all squirming. And it's not just because we're squeamish either, it's because this practice, this psychopathology, is so alien to us. Most of us will do anything in our power to avoid pain. The survival instinct dictates that we keep our bodies intact. So to consider that somebody we care about might be intentionally hurting themselves confuses and scares us. And while that is understandable, we need to stop being scared and confused and start being open and communicative, because our inability to talk about self-harm is only exacerbating the issue. Let's get on the same page. Self-harm is a coping mechanism. People use it to deal with negative emotions. Oftentimes, the same feelings that drive a person to self-harm, shame, self-loathing, rejection, will stop that person from seeking out the help they need or more constructive methods of dealing with what they feel. Now, the old claim was that self-harm is manipulative, or that people do it for attention. But this self-medicating secrecy invalidates that claim, and the science invalidates it too. The same part of your brain that processes relief from physical pain, taking away the razor blade or the match, that part of your brain is also responsible for processing relief from emotional strife. Which means that as confusing and scary as self-harm is, it does its job. When polled, the two feelings that parents of children who self-harmed reported having were fear and disappointment. The fear comes from our conflation of self-harm with suicide. We don't know how to understand cutting yourself aside from wanting to kill yourself. And it's natural because any parent would be afraid to learn that their child is suicidal. But the two are separate and distinctive acts. In fact, the practice that I've been talking about is clinically termed non-suicidal self-injury. Our overbearing fear and our need to treat the two as being clinically identical only adds to the atmosphere of shame and secrecy that we put upon those who suffer. And finally, the most confusing part of this talk for me is the disappointment. That a parent of a child who is intentionally hurting themselves to deal with negative feelings would feel disappointed. We cannot continue to treat self-harm as a character flaw, because when we do, we deny the sufferer their ability to heal and to seek out constructive help. I'm putting this on all of you because to this day, I don't know what happened to Elle. And I can tell you that that's not an experience you want to have. So work past your discomfort and fear. Work to be open and cognizant to the emotional behaviors of the people you care about. It is more common and less terrifying than we think it is. So we need to start talking. If we can create a community where the harmful stigmas previous generations have assigned to self-harm no longer exist, then we have taken the first step towards creating a community where self-harm no longer exists. Thank you.
Next up, Mandy Bitar, what we can all learn from Buddhism.
Growing up, I was pretty non-religious. My parents are Buddhist, and my grandparents are even more Buddhist, but I remember deciding early on that I didn't really believe in reincarnation. It wasn't until much later that I started to discover Buddhism for myself, as a way of sort of coping with the stress of senior year and all its ups and downs. And when doing so, I found that it was very different from the textbook definitions that I had memorized in world history, and definitely different from most of the Western perspectives that we had grown to become used to. I'd always seen Buddhism the same way that most Christians, or most Americans, saw Christianity. It was normalized, just a part of life and your identity. It wasn't exotic or part of some hippie movement. And as I learned more about Buddhism for myself, I found that I could follow many of its ideas without feeling restricted or committed to one faith. The guiding principle that I learned from Buddhism is that everything is connected. The universe, time, and space are all guided by this idea of interdependence, where everything is interwoven, guided by the forces of cause and effect, and we all contribute to the greater energy and the being that is the world. One idea that you hear often about Buddhism is karma. And for those who are unfamiliar with the term, this is basically the idea that past actions form and shape the events of the future. And while some people take this to mean that if you do good things will happen, be bad things will happen. You can also take this with a grain of salt, where if something bad happens, you act more positive, or find joy in little things in life. One way you can apply this sort of idea is with college admissions, which I'm sure a lot of us are going through. We all get rejections, and while there's nothing we can really do once we press submit, we can control how we react. I have one friend. She's been getting a few rejection letters, not because she's lazy or unintelligent, it's just how her month's been going. And instead of letting this bring her down, instead of becoming consumed by the negativity, she didn't let this ruin her senior year. She still went out, had fun, and she actually just got her acceptance to William & Mary. So she's doing good now. So this is just one way that you can sort of take the idea of karma and use it more in a secular way. Because while, karma may or may not have been the reason she got into William & Mary, it allowed her to have a more positive outlook on the whole situation, and she didn't let it ruin her senior year. Which brings me to the idea of energy. In Buddhism, they believe in a sort of spiritual energy of positivity and negativity. And this can be taken literally or figuratively, but the idea is that not only your actions, but your words and thoughts form your energy and what you put out there into the world. So this works with the idea of karma, and also enforces an idea of what you say, what you think, what you do, also has an impact on the entire universe and the world's energy. If you imagine every bad thought you've had, every mean thing you've said, every bad action, not all of it, but maybe recently, if you imagine it as a cloud of smelly, CO2 emitting, polluted smoke, and imagine it dissipating into the universe, you can imagine the kind of effect that your negativity can have. One way that you can use this sort of idea of positive and negative energy, especially for high schoolers, is when using social media. When we're constantly bombarded with photos, captions, pictures, tweets, Snapchats from millions of accounts and pages, it becomes almost instinctual to judge other people's. But if you consciously notice that you're doing this, realize that you're unnecessarily putting negativity into the world, you become not only a better person, but you prevent putting this negativity into the world. Or even worse, if you send screenshots to your friends, forward things, which I'm sure some of us have done, not only do you encourage this to your friends, but you're also manifesting this negativity and verbalizing it into words. So with this sort of idea of being mindful of others comes another Buddhist idea of compassion. So with compassion, one thing you have to remember is not only to have it for yourself, for your friends or your loved ones, but for everyone equally. One Sanskrit word in Buddhism is anatta, which means no sense of self. Not that you don't have your own identity or personality, but that you choose to identify with the world as a whole, and you choose to equally see everyone, knowing that you're part of a bigger universe or being. So if you keep this in mind, not only does it humble you to remember that you're a little insignificant compared to everyone else, it lets you think of what others may need or how you can contribute to the world. This is especially important to remember in a time of political instability, because we have a tendency to empathize more with people who agree with us or who we can identify with, instead of everyone understanding that we are all human, we all have experiences, although we may have different context or lives, we all experience the same emotions. So with this in mind, just try to put more good into the world than harm. Try to think what you can do for the universe, and try to think less of yourself, in whatever capacity that may be. To end, I'd like to quote the Bodhisattva. This is a prayer, actually the Dalai Lama's favorite. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, may I too prevail to dispel the misery of the world.
All right. Next up, Charlotte Twenton, Media's Effect on Greek Culture.
letters, but it packs as much terror into that one sentence as it did in first grade. On the first day of school, first grade, Joey Welsh came up to me and we made a bet. I lost, which happens. He insisted that, as we made a bet, as the winner, he got a kiss from me. I said no, that was not part of the bet. We never agreed on those grounds. But he kept leaning in and coming forward to me saying, no, you owe me a kiss. I ran away. And every single day for the next couple months, he would chase me around the playground trying to kiss me. Now, the first few times I went to my teacher and I said, Joey won't stay out of my personal bubble. And she said, well, of course. He has a crush on you. That's what boys do. They chase after girls when they have a crush on them. It's understandable. Somehow, within those next 2 months, I got dragged into one of his birthday parties. And while there, his mother said, couldn't you just pretend that you like him? Couldn't you just be his boyfriend for today? It's his birthday. I said, no. There's a photo of me at that birthday party standing far away from everyone else because he wanted to put his arm around me and I refused. Looking back, it isn't the fact that he chased me around the playground that's weird. Well, it is, but that's not the scariest part. The scariest part is how the adults responded. That it was normal to behave like this. Rape culture is defined by a culture in which rape is not only prominent, but normalized, and even sometimes romanticized. Now, some characteristics include things like the degradation of women's consent through media such as music, television, and TV. We all know this song, and we all know what the words meant when he said those blurred lines of consent. Other characteristics include things like open harassment for women, that's somehow accepted in society, like catcalling. In New York, a woman did an experiment in which she wore a normal outfit, a black shirt and black pants, and walked around New York City for 10 hours. She filmed what happened to her as she walked through the streets, and the result was astonishing. Non-stop, continuous comments on her body, even though she was fully covered. Another characteristic of rape culture is the lack of punishment for rapists. In a study done by the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, it found that only 3% of rapists are jailed. So to give you a little comparison, about 25% of drug dealers are jailed every year, so that just about sums it up. Another study done by the United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention found that when they surveyed thousands of men, 1 in 3 of them said that they would rape a woman if they knew that they'd get away with it. When looking at statistics like these, we have to ask ourselves, how did this happen? In the U.S., Virginia is one of the lowest rape per 100,000 people. But I myself know at least 10 of my closest friends who went off to college and came back with an experience of rape. Again, you ask yourselves, how did we let this happen? Was it us? Was it the adults? Was it just behavior that boys have? Or girls have too? I'd like to turn to media, the things that influence us more than we think that they do. Every day we listen to music, every single day we look at movies, every single day we look at the news. And I think it has a greater impact on our own perspective of other people than we think it does. Most recently, television shows like Game of Thrones, where it has 50 rape scenes in the series thus far, have become a big deal. In the TV show, the main female protagonist, Daenerys, gets raped. And it isn't used as an obstacle for her to overcome. No, she actually ends up falling in love with the guy who rapes her. And in these TV shows, the male never gets the punishment, or the rapist never gets the punishment. It's just accepted, romanticized, and let go. But it's not only rape. Sexually abusive relationships are romanticized in a twisted, strange way. And we accept it.
Seemed poised to tear itself apart. The crashed X-Wing and Star Destroyer in Jakku are symbolic of the experience of Star Wars fans throughout the last 10 years. The fans, including me, were lost and marooned without hope. and gives us the heroes we desperately yearn for. Finn proves the humanity of stormtroopers. Han Solo returns to mentor the next generation. Luke and Leia hover in the background. And Rey allegorizes the fan experience, waiting for her destiny while repurposing the past to maintain her existence. Star Wars also lends itself very well to social science. So, in other words, sure, the action is cool, but Luke is Moses, and his father has personality disorder. Yoda has dyslexia, Leia's bipolar, Jar Jar Binks, ADHD, C-3PO, OCD. And there's another layer to the droids of Star Wars. They're slaves. Think about it. 3PO and R2 are denied service in the Mos Eisley Cantina. The bartender didn't even want them inside. 3PO repeatedly uses the word master as opposed to caretaker or even owner. And he fears terrible consequences for R2-D2 when he takes off looking for Obi-Wan in A New Hope. Droids perform all manner of functions for their so-called masters, from wiping down diner tables to translating to flying starships, even going into battle. There are important parallels between the Force and the Christian God and the Hindu concept of prana, which literally means life force. George Lucas himself has said that Emperor Palpatine was inspired by Richard Nixon and the Rebel Alliance by the North Vietnamese. The barrenness of Jakku, the desert planet where Rey lives in The Force Awakens, could imply the possibility of a world which we've laid to waste. A world where there's never enough to eat, and we survive by scrounging for scrap among the ruins of our civilization. Though this view is unnerving, on one level Star Wars is a socio-political commentary. Slavery and mutually assured destruction are abiding social and political realities. Many of the themes and ideas posed by Star Wars are intertwined with the future of humanity. The presence of the First Order in the Force Awakens illustrates the diversity of Star Wars. To George Lucas, Anakin Skywalker is the story, and his redemption ends the story. But if you take everything into account, Anakin doesn't bring balance to anything, at least not for long. With the release of The Force Awakens, Star Wars is less a legendary epic and more a reflection of real life, with a cyclical struggle between good and evil. And you know the struggle is real when the Lincoln Memorial turns to the dark side. But Star Wars isn't all about destiny or cosmic cycles either. It's also an exercise in self-determination and individualism. In Rogue One, Galen Erso is brilliantly depicted as being solely responsible for that fatal exhaust port flaw in the Death Star that the rebels exploit in A New Hope. Though the killing off of every major character was somewhat predictable, this approach didn't feel forced or overly convenient. Each character met their end on their own terms. These add another layer of cruelty to the Empire's reign, but also illustrate the power of people to do what they feel is right despite great risk. But most importantly, Rogue One is the Star Wars story we never knew. It's gritty and starkly devoid of the Force as we know it. The characters far more diverse and flawed than those of the other films. When I saw The Force Awakens, I was struck by the sight of a black stormtrooper fighting alongside a female Jedi for the freedom of the galaxy. But in Star Wars, none of that matters. Any character can do anything, whether you're male, female, short and green, or a big walking carpet that's in Leia's way. The absence of labels and preconceived notions is integral to Star Wars. Finn is just Finn, and Rey is just Rey. My belief and my hope is that the objectivity of Star Wars is something that we can someday achieve. So as you go through your lives, never forget two things about stories. First is that make-believe is really the beginning of making beliefs. By spinning tales of the world we desire, we reinforce all that we hold dear. Second is the importance of stories and storytelling. Before the times of artificial light, Stories of all kinds were told around campfires after dark. Star Wars is the ultimate reminder of our storytelling instinct and of how we need stories. Because without stories, there is no light in darkness. May the Force be with you.
All right, next up, Sam Hinton. Let's have a conversation about depression.
All right, show of hands. Who in here has been to a concert? Wow, those were some fast hands. Okay, now keep that hand up if you've been to more than one concert. More than two? Okay. All right, you can put your hands down. So a lot of concert experiences. I've been to a lot of concerts as well. And I've even met a good amount of celebrities at said concerts. And each time I have a phenomenal time, even if it wasn't during my prime. And then afterwards, and every single one of you who raise your hand will know, I'm struck with what some people call post-concert depression, or PCD. Now, if you're not familiar with that term, I took the liberty to look it up on a very reliable source, Urban Dictionary. It is defined as the feeling of depression after you see your favorite band. Usually involves depression over the fact that your life's purpose is now fulfilled after seeing that band, and that you might not get to see them again. And while I was searching this, the suggested searches popped up. And things such as how to cure PCD and PCD symptoms popped up. And there were actual articles about treating the symptoms of PCD, like wearing merchandise for a month, and how to not let it affect your relationships. I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? Just way over the top. Now imagine you're hearing this as someone who actually has depression. That's part of the issue with the stigma of depression. Many people think it's synonymous with being sad. Not true. Post-concert depression, that's not actual depression. It just contributes to this common misunderstanding of the serious effects of it. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, depression symptoms can include things like persistent, sad, anxious, or empty moods, feelings of pessimism, hopelessness, helplessness, loss of interest or pleasure, memory or decision-making problems, sleep disorders, thoughts of suicide or death, suicide attempts, physical aches or pains that have no physical cause and don't go away with treatment. These kinds of things aren't just wished away with a different mindset. You can't just choose happiness over this. They're uncontrollable and unexplainable. A writer for the Huffington Post, suffering from depression, compared it to living in a small, dark prison cell, occasionally being allowed out to walk around the courtyard once. All the while knowing it won't last, but hoping just the same, only to be led right back into that cell, where you don't know when your next break will be, or if it'll even come, just sitting there as empty as that cell. That's how we describe depression, isn't it? Through metaphors. That's all depression ever is to society. A list of symptoms on WebMD, an exaggeration when feeling sad or stressed, a problem only after someone commits suicide, or even romanticized poetry. But why is it never simply a conversation? Suicide is the third leading cause of death in the 15 to 24-year-old range, and at least 90% of those have some type of mental illness, such as depression. Now, I've heard a lot of things about how selfish or short-sighted it is to commit suicide. But those affected aren't in a healthy state of mind to look past that. Most of the time, they're completely aware of how it will affect their loved ones around them. But this person, their own mind is such an unbearable place to be in, they literally want to stop existing. Someone thinking like that, feeling like that, isn't going to be thinking in such a logistical and long-term way as you. All they're thinking about is what they're feeling, how to end it, how to get out. Suicide. A teenager affected by depression is 12 times more likely to commit suicide. Something I've noticed is that when it comes to suicidal teenagers, most people are so supportive when something happens. And that's great. That's so great. But no one ever really does anything until it reaches that extremely visible level, that last straw. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more going on underneath besides just, I want to die. These are PET scans comparing brain activity between a normal brain and a brain affected by depression. The brain activity is not the same. I know I've thrown a lot of harsh facts and thoughts at you about
being emotional. Now, if you can look at that and laugh, we begin to share a commonality. More often than not, people avoid being emotional like it's the plague. According to evolutionary psychology, we are created to be defensive. It's encoded in each and every one of us with the intent of keeping us alive. While this did wonders for our ancestors when pterodactyls plucked us from the skies, there seems to be a lack of large lizard-related deaths these days. Now we prowl through the streets of the urban jungle, which hosts its own new obstacles that would have our prehistoric ancestors shiver. However, since we've outgrown our sharpened spears, we've developed new tools to battle our daily challenges. One of these is empathy. Empathy allows us as a species to form more complex relationships with the people around us. And the thing is, we desperately need that. According to Maslow's pyramids of human needs, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, having intimate relationships is only the third step in the process towards self-actualization after feelings of security and basic needs like food and water, things we need solely to exist. As it's the case that we need these intimate relationships to be content, fulfilled people, the question then becomes, how do we achieve that goal? Well, unlike our ancestors that made full use of the evolutionary trait to be defensive, our society has now surpassed needing to constantly be on high alert. Instead, it's exactly the opposite of what our ancestors used to survive that will allow us to thrive today. That's allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. Being vulnerable is difficult, and to some can be incredibly intimidating. The mountain, however, once crossed, allows for an incredible amount of growth to occur in your life. As I'm sure you've all heard the adage, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. We can relate this to opening up our own personal vulnerabilities, each step requiring a certain amount of effort and different steps carrying different weights. While it's daunting, the rewards of opening yourself up far exceed whatever fears that may cause for you. For one, it allows an avenue for personal growth. By finding individuals that you can be vulnerable in front of, it humanizes you. This allows not only for tighter bonds to be formed between you and the individual, but also helps you to come to terms with your own shortcomings. The heaviest step I ever took came on the heels of my father getting onto a plane and telling my mother that he was never coming back. The reality had set in, and it became clear to me that I would have to make a choice. Do I move back to Texas with my mother and 5 siblings to certain economic ruin, or do I stay with a man I know can put me through college, but who I no longer can recognize? In the downward spiral that I was in a last-ditch effort to save myself, I had stripped the situation of all emotional connection. Those prehistoric tendencies had surfaced, and I could not comprehend the scope of the decision that I had concretely made. That is, until I told my mother that I would be sure to visit. As soon as those words had escaped my mouth, I saw the sparkle in my mother's eye extinguish. And I know I had made a terrible, terrible mistake. As horrific that it was that I had told my mother that, let alone formulate that thought, it somehow became a positive as my mother opened up to me. What had been a scared boy frantically trying to grasp onto something, anything, as he was falling, she wrapped in love. She allowed herself to be vulnerable after I had cut her to the core. Through compassion, patience, and understanding, we both walked out stronger individuals. Not only had my mother and I become closer through allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, this tumultuous time did come to an end as both of my parents did end up coming back together. That heaviest, most vulnerable step that I had taken in my life had ended by becoming the most empowering and brightest moment that I had ever witnessed. By depriving ourselves of the right to show emotion, we've robbed ourselves of the opportunity to witness those brightest moments. The fear surrounding vulnerability has created a self-repeating cycle of psychological dissonance that affects each and every one of us. Dissonance is the disharmonious relationship between two factors. In this case, our emotive side and the rough social stigmas that we allow to surround them. It seems so logical that in a world that throws enough curveballs at us as is, that we would allow ourselves to create more strife for us day to day. Everyone gets embarrassed to ask for help or allow themselves to appear not in charge. All heroes have their kryptonite. All heroes have their fatal flaws. It's time for us to stop associating having emotion with being flawed. We all bleed the same. Why are we pretending our veins are made of iron?
And for our final talk tonight, we have Skylar Powell, Realize Your Passions.
Yeah.
What makes you alive? Is it a heartbeat, breath, or brain activity? All those are essential to live, but they don't make you alive. Passion is what makes you alive. It's what gets you out of bed in the morning and makes your life worthwhile. In the movie Dead Poets Society, Robin Williams says, quote, "We are members of the human race, and the human race is filled with passion. And medicine, law, business, engineering are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, those are what we stay alive for." End quote. Today, I want to help you realize your passions. And there's 3 things I want you to remember. It's be yourself, better yourself, and be bigger than yourself. So let's start with step 1. Be yourself. Be yourself seems simple enough, right? I remember the first time my mom told me to be myself, and I was like, well, that's horrible advice. I literally have an identical twin. Obviously, I can't do this whole be yourself thing. But like any good mom, she encouraged me to pursue being myself. So shortly after, I became a philatelist. Philatelist is a Greek word that literally translates into someone who loves postage stamps. So I was subscribed to a philatelist magazine that talked about philatelist things. And I saw that a philatelist fair was coming to the area, where all the philatelists would get together and talk about philately. So of course, I convinced my dad to take me. I was so excited that morning, I couldn't even eat breakfast. I remember we showed up, and we walked in, and I was surprised to find that I was the youngest in the room by about half a century. But I was happy and having fun. See, when it comes to finding your passion, all that matters is that you love what you're doing. We're all kids at heart, so let's revisit our childhood. What did you love to do? See, the key here is you. Sometimes we let the passions of others dictate what makes us happy. But are you really going to let the murmurs of a few decide what being yourself is? So be yourself. Step 2, better yourself. For most of high school, I've struggled with self-confidence issues. I'm constantly asking myself questions like, who am I to be talented, gorgeous, or smart? But really the question should be, who am I not to be? I'm a child of God, and I was made for greatness. You're a child of God. You were made for greatness. Friends, each one of you has so much potential. So let's use that to grow ourselves. Some hobbies that you can use to better yourself are exercising, reading, but not just fiction, but non-fiction as well, writing essays, participating in some form of art, and the list goes on and on. Alex Harris, the author of one of my favorite books, Do Hard Things, said, quote, "One of life's greatest lessons which we all must learn can be expressed in one phrase. That was nothing. Watch this." Challenge yourselves and others, end quote. So when you start to better yourself, you can't help but better the world. It was once said, quote, "Do not let others look down on you because you are young. Instead, set an example in life, in love, in faith, and in purity," end quote. So let's try this. When I point at you, you're going to snap, clap, pat, or stomp. Let's practice. All right, we got to get everyone doing it, guys. Go on. So you're probably wondering, how does bettering myself better the world? Well, just like a single snap seems so quiet, and one raindrop seems so insignificant, but if you have an entire generation snapping, if you have an entire generation bettering themselves, then the single raindrops become a flood. But why is realizing your passion so important? It's important because you don't want to waste time. Let's leave our mark on this world. Test our limits, push ourselves, try hard things. In 2015, I went to a youth education summit in Richmond, Virginia. I met a senator whom I don't remember his name anymore, but I'll never forget what he told me. He said, "You have to leave your mark on this world. But not just a mark, you have to leave a dent on this world." Friends, what do you have to lose? Because right now you're just losing time. Let's be ourselves, let's better ourselves, and let's be bigger than ourselves. Get out there and find your philately. Try something new and inspire others. Be a raindrop, a single snap, and together, let's make a flood. Thank you.
Introduce yourself to your neighbor next to you who don't know each other. The whole community is here. Welcome everybody. Ask to be thank you all so much for coming.